Again, he goes back. Pilger would never claim to be outside of ideology, to be neutral. But he emphasizes the importance of basing reporting and conclusions on facts. And he says that that sometimes makes it hard for people reacting to him to know what to do. Right? That fact-based reporting, he says, leads to conclusions that defy easy categorization. Right? So he's talking about this interview with John Bolton, which we're going to watch a little clip of next. Just for context, John Bolton was a government official during the Bush administration. He was a Republican in the United States and also associated with the more conservative wing of the Republican Party on matters of foreign policy. He was an undersecretary, went on to be UN ambassador for a while. Very, very kind of hardline, some people would call him a hawk, strong supporter of the invasion of Iraq. He's in that political camp. And as you'll see in the interview clip we're going to watch, he's a little perplexed by Pilger. So he says first to Pilger, are you a member of the Labor Party? Again, the Labor Party has tended to track politically with the Democratic Party in the United States. Tony Blair, the Prime Minister, the Labor Prime Minister for many years, was a strong supporter of the invasion of Iraq. George Bush and Tony Blair were partners in that. So Bolton is sort of reacting to the Labor Party as analogous to the Democrats and therefore must be liberal. A whole set of assumptions kick in. And Pilger says, well, no, the Labor Party is on your side. And he's talking about how when you pursue, I think what Pilger would call a principled critique of power, you end up critical of both sides in a two-party system, or all sides in a multi-party system sometimes. And that defies the easy categorization. So that reporters who do pursue this sort of critique of power, people who stay within those conventional definitions are going to be somewhat confused by it. And I want to play a clip from that film that Pilger mentions, Breaking the Silence. Breaking the Silence was a film he did shortly after the invasion of Iraq that very early in the history of that war raised a lot of critical questions that had later become evident. So in this film, which we're not going to watch entirely in class, but you can find online if you want it, very early, right after the invasion of Iraq, Pilger is raising questions that will later become commonplace, but he's doing it very early in the game. And I want to play this particular clip. This is John Bolton's face that you see right here. It's during a segment of the film where Pilger is asking questions about the civilian casualties in both the invasion of Afghanistan and Iraq, and how many civilians have died given the nature of the war.
An issue.
Well, I think Americans, like most people, are mostly concerned about their own countrymen. I don't know how many Iraqi civilians were killed, but I can assure you that the number is the absolute minimal that it's possible in modern warfare. One of the stunning things about the quick coalition victory was how little damage was done to Iraqi infrastructure and how low Iraqi casualties were. And I think
that's quite high if it's 10,000 civilians.
Well, I think it's quite low if you look at the size of the military operation that was undertaken.
It's practically an inevitability in war that there are going to be innocent people who get hurt, no matter how a professional military, a properly behaved military, puts into avoiding damage to non-combatants and to civilian infrastructure.
Mr. Fyfe, that sounds fine, sitting here in Washington. But in Iraq and in Afghanistan, which is my most recent experience, that's not how it looks at all.
May I interrupt for a moment? I apologize, sir. Would you stop tape, please, for one moment? Thank you very much. Let me know when you stop tape.
Excuse me?
I'm sorry I'm doing this purposefully, sir. Have we stopped tape?
This is very serious.
I was not under the impression, sir.
Mr. Fyfe's minder, an Army colonel, suddenly stopped the interview as I had pursued the question of civilian deaths.
I agree.
Over at the State Department, Undersecretary John Bolton concluded his interview with his own insight into my line of questions.
One of our major objectives today is to put the government of Iraq back in the hands of Iraqi people so that they can enjoy the benefits of their country's resources and so that American soldiers can come home as soon as possible.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Bolton.
Okay.
Appreciate it.
So are you a Labour Party member?
Well, Labour Party, they're the Conservatives in our
So
country.
you're a Communist Party member?
You can see in that final segment, Bolton is kind of incredulous. Like, who is this guy? He's asking me questions. You can almost hear him saying, these are not the questions I usually get. Who is this guy? He must be, he's got an accent. He's probably crazy. Maybe he's a Labour Party, maybe he's a member of the Communist Party. Thinking in very conventional political terms and having a hard time processing the approach that Pilger is taking to this. In the previous segment, he's interviewing Douglas Feith, who was another member of the Bush administration, and you notice that because he was pursuing questions that traditionally at least most of the US journalists were not asking about the effect of the invasions on the civilian population, the level of casualties, that the Pentagon official who was sort of the minder, the person organizing the interview, actually stopped the interview, which shows you that Pilger was operating outside of the norms of objective journalism. Right? That the Pentagon official was so sort of taken aback by the direction of the questions that all he could figure out what to do was to stop the interview. Right? So in these clips, you see the approach Pilger takes, and implicitly the degree to which his approach is very different than the so-called neutral, non-ideological, objective journalism. Right? It produces a different kind of interaction with officials. Right? Pilger is not afraid to sit down with officials, but he engages them in a very different way than most mainstream journalists. Right? So those are some little vignettes from Pilger's career and the way he understands that career that I think point to the approach he takes, and also point to why I chose the book and consider Pilger a good role model. Here's just a quote that I think sums up a lot of this. Pilger once said, "I'm a reporter who values bearing witness." Bearing witness, it's an interesting phrase. It almost seems more theological than journalistic. Bearing witness. And that does capture, I think, his approach to journalism. Bearing witness about the abuses of power, bearing witness about the consequences of those abuses, and also bearing witness to people's resistance and struggle in that situation. And I think my own view is that that is, in fact, the core of journalism. And I want to end in a somewhat unorthodox way, perhaps, but I'm trying to make this point. It's a song that I want to play for you that I think gets at this. It's a song from a CD compiled to benefit children in East Timor, which is a country, it's a long story about the suffering in that country. The CD is called Love from a Short Distance, and the song, hold on one second, the song is of the same name. All right. It's going to take me a minute to do the...
There is no...
Okay. I'm going to put up the lyrics to the song. I've got to multitask here, which is never easy for me. I'm going to put up the lyrics for the song and play this song. The song is sung by a guy named Bono. He's a member of a very popular group from Ireland called U2. You may have heard of him. He's also known these days for political activism. He runs around the world with rich people and famous people and makes all sorts of pronouncements. But I'm not interested in Bono as celebrity here. I'm interested in the lyrics. Bono and the others who wrote this song are not writing about journalism. But I think the spirit of this song is very much in line with the idea of journalism that you heard Pilger articulate. So I think it's an interesting thing to ponder as maybe a statement about the ideals of journalism. So
silence deep enough.
let's try that again.
There is no.
Apparently I can't do both at the same time, so we'll just have to, we'll listen and then I'll put
No
the,
politician debating.
there we go.
There is no silence deep enough. No corruption deep enough. No politician debating. To bury your story. To keep it from us. Love from us. There is no blackout time. No business deal being. No hard hollow. No grave wide. To bury your story. To keep it from us. Love from
I wanted to play that whole song because there's a kind of haunting quality to it, sung both in English and in the native language of Timor, that I think is important. The lyrics are up on the screen and you can take a look at them while I explain that the island of Timor, separated into East and West Timor, a small island near Indonesia, was invaded by the Indonesians in 1974 with the support of the United States and Great Britain. In the course of the Indonesian invasion and occupation for about 25 years, about a third of the population of Timor died. It was a small island cut in half, about 600,000 people in East Timor. About 200,000 people were killed during that invasion and occupation. That makes it, in proportional terms, the worst genocide probably since the end of World War II. Right? And for most of that history, most of that 25 years, the world paid no attention to the suffering of the Timorese people. There were a few people who did. John Pilger was one of them. He made a film about Timor. And the lyrics of this song, I think, get at this idealism that motivates people like Pilger. There is no silence deep enough, no corruption thick enough, no blackout dark enough, no business deal big enough, no politician bent enough, no heart hollow enough, no grave wide enough to bury your story. That even when these kinds of events in the world go forward, even when this suffering happens, it's still crucial to tell the story, to not let the story die in the hopes that change is possible. And I think that's the kind of idealism that motivates the best of journalism. Not all journalism deals with these, major world kinds of events, but even at the most local level, it's that idealism that motivates the best of journalism. And I think, agree or disagree with the conclusions Pilger reaches, it's that spirit that I admire and the reason I assign the books.